Sorry, started a couple minutes late tonight. I believe we're live. I believe you can hear me. I believe you can see me. I was just about to click the go live button and happened to notice Jay Wright stepping down, resigning, retiring, whatever you want to call it. He's hanging it up at Villanova. And I mean, I'm not sure, I could wake up tomorrow morning with my face stapled to the carpet, and I'm not sure I'd be as surprised as I am right now. Jay Wright, he's not a young man by any stretch of the imagination. He's not a spring chicken. He's been around for a while, but I definitely did not think he was knocking on the doorsteps of retirement. Wow. I mean, Jay Wright was, I think, the guy that most people pointed to as, sort of ascending to that mantle of, one of the, I don't even know what you want to call it, not elite coaches or top coaches, but I mean, with Coach K retiring, Roy Williams stepped down, last year, there was a bit of a void sort of forming of that, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the old guard. I mean, Jay Wright was essentially becoming the old guard. I mean, I guess you still have Bill Self out there. I mean, Bruce Pearl's been around for a long time, but man, I thought Jay Wright would sort of take that position as, the guy at the top of the sport. And he's not. He's going to the opposite direction. He's hanging it up. Who knows what'll come out between now, the time I'm talking right now and the time you hear this, but it, hopefully there's nothing, medically or family related or anything like that's led to this decision. I hope it's something that he's choosing to do because he wants to do, not because he has to do for any circumstances, unfortunate or tragic or otherwise. And I know this is obviously the Panther-Lair Show, and we talk about Pitt stuff here, and we try and direct everything back to Panther-Lair.com, and we're going to talk about Jeff Capel, and we're going to talk about transfer additions, we're going to talk about Pat Narduzzi getting recruits, and football recruiting really starting to heat up here. But Pitt played against Jay Wright a lot for a lot of years and had some epic battles and had some great wins and some I shouldn't use tragic, but some heartbreaking losses along the way. And to see him out of nowhere in late April hang it up, I mean that's major news across college basketball. That's and we don't typically get into the national college basketball topics here in the Panther-Lair Show, but yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one, and shocked, and it's hard to talk about something like that sort of right now. I mean, the news just came out. I think I saw John Rothstein was the first one I saw who reported it. I don't know, someone else might have had it before he did. But nevertheless, I mean, that's a major move for college basketball. Best of luck to Jay Wright. I always found him to be a classy guy. There were coaches that Pitt would have epic battles against over the years. I mean, going back to the Big East days, it's not really anything you can point to in the ACC of epic battles. But I mean, there were epic battles against Connecticut with Jim Calhoun, and obviously epic battles against Syracuse with Jim Boeheim. There were epic battles against Marquette with Tom Crean. There were epic battles against Notre Dame with Mike Bray, and there were epic battles against Villanova with Jay Wright. And I mean, I think out of that list of guys I just said, I don't really have any quarrel with Mike Bray. Notre Dame teams annoy me, but I don't have any issue with Mike Bray. He seems okay. Jim Calhoun I kind of appreciated. Even, I don't know if he rubbed everyone the right way. I don't really have any interest in Jim Boeheim or Tom Crean. I don't think I would have any, those guys, they just, I tell you what it is. It's sort of, a guy like Jim Boeheim, it's the best way to say this. I've seen too many instances in person and then also just recorded of him being a bully from the microphone. Being a bully from his position. And I understand you're frustrated after a game or whatever the situation might be, but you don't need to be a bully. All right, you don't need to try to push people around. And he seemed to do it to student media a lot. And I don't need to see that. I don't think you need to conduct yourself like that. I think it's unprofessional. And you may feel like you're getting asked unprofessional questions, but I think you still have a professional obligation to carry yourself in a certain way. And so I never cared for that about him, and Tom Crean is just Tom Crean. It's a long-winded way of saying Jay Wright. I mean, he always seemed like a perfectly nice guy. You might have gotten frustrated because Pitt lost to him, and certainly they lost to him in the biggest game of, who knows, as long as I've been watching Pitt basketball. But he seemed like a perfectly nice guy. And so, I never had any issue with him. He was always pleasant to interview. He was always pleasant in post-game press conferences. And, it's unfortunate, certainly having covered a game that he's been involved with in a long, long time. But it's unfortunate to see him go. So that news, normally we wouldn't talk about something like this right now, but it's notable. You know what I mean? It's notable. And the fact that it just happened, the fact that it just came out right when we were about to start the show, you'll forgive me if I'm spending a few moments to talk about it, because it's sort of fresh in my mind. Before I can get into all the Pitt topics I want to talk about, that's sort of right on the tip of my tongue, or at the front of my brain, however you want to put it. But anyway, this is the Panther-Lair Show. Appreciate you tuning in here on a Wednesday night. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the address. That's where we do this every Wednesday night at 8:30. We tape this thing live. You might listen to the podcast through the week, and we appreciate that. You might watch the video through the week. We appreciate that as well. We most appreciate it if you come hang out with us on a Wednesday night. 8:30 till 9:30 or so, give or take a few minutes on either side of it. We go live and we talk about Pitt sports, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting. We cover it all, because that's what we do at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You find everything you need at Panther-Lair.com. And then once you read all the content, you read all the articles, and you watch all the analysis and get all the info and everything you need out of the content, you go over to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and you talk to other Pitt fans about everything you just read. So whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports, or wherever you might see it, Twitter or Facebook or on our site, wherever it is, you want to then go to the message boards and talk about it at Panther-Lair.com. It's the best online community of Pitt sports fans. It's the best source of Pitt sports coverage. I mean, everything you could look for as a Pitt fan, you're going to find Panther-Lair.com. And that's what this show is every Wednesday night, is an hour of Panther-Lair.com coverage distilled into about an hour or so of live streaming on YouTube. So, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like and rate and review, and mostly subscribe. That's the most important thing. We very much appreciate that, because we appreciate your support. I got a lot to talk about because there's been a lot going on. Jeff Capel added another piece for the roster of the upcoming season. By my count, they're up to 7. We got 7 guys committed for this roster. 7 guys are going to be on the roster for next season, so that's a step in the right direction. Pat Narduzzi got a commitment from the 2024 recruiting class. On Wednesday, a whole bunch of guys announced they had scheduled their official visits for June, so that's shaping up to be a big month. There's a lot going on. I want to start off with a question, though, because Michael B is a super chatter. He's a regular super chatter, and we appreciate him. If you want to be a super chatter, make sure your comments or questions get read and heard and answered here during the live stream. You click the little $ down at the bottom. Throw us a couple bucks. Support the podcast. We appreciate that, and we will make sure your comments and questions get read and answered. And Michael B says, "Hi, Chris. I was just curious. Do you think that Jeff Capel should be making some changes to his staff by now? I get loyalty and all, but it's year 5 next year, and the program is a mess. It frustrates me. He won't make a single change." Yeah, I mean, this is a common topic. Pitt fans have been talking about this a lot for the last, throughout the offseason, and really dating back to last offseason. And so, here's my thought. I have a couple thoughts on it, actually. So one, I think it's trickier in basketball than it is in football to talk about staff changes from the outside, because football, everybody's jobs are so sort of specific and tied to certain areas of the team that, if you watch a game or you watch a season and the offense stinks, you fire the offensive coordinator. You watch the season and the receivers aren't playing up to the level they should play at, you fire the wide receivers coach. If you've had a coordinator in place for a couple years and his side of the ball is not getting it done, you fire him. You make a change. Pat Narduzzi was dissatisfied with the progress of the offense after the 2018 season, and he fired Sean Watson. Pat Narduzzi was dissatisfied with the progress of the offense. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I think there was a lot that went into the offensive coordinator change this offseason. But when you're dissatisfied with how a position group is doing, or one side of the ball or the other, you make a change. And I think we can see it from the outside. We can see from the outside that this position group's not living up to expectations. This group's not doing well enough. This group is not playing up to the level that they need it to be. We can see that from the outside. Basketball's a little trickier. All right, I'm getting around to answering your question and kind of actually getting around to justifying giving you a non-answer. Basketball's a little trickier. I don't know what part of... I can't look at the product on the court. Or even, to some extent, the recruiting even. But if I look at what happened on the court, right, when they lost this game, why'd they lose to Georgia Tech? When they had that winning streak going, and they came home and they lost to Georgia Tech, was that Malone Brown's fault? Was that Jason Capel's fault? Was that Tim O'Toole's fault? I don't know. When they, what were some of the other, when they lost to the Citadel, whose fault is that? Is that on Tim O'Toole? Is that on Jason Capel? When they lost to St. Francis, PA last year, was that on Malone Brown? I can't look at any of those things. Oh, they can't shoot very well. Well, is that a product of the guys they have, or is that a product of the coaching they're getting? And that's not to say the coaches aren't responsible for the players that are assembled on the roster, but I can't sit here and say they're a lousy shooting team. Jason Capel has to go. I can't make that connection. Okay, so it's tough for me to sit from the outside and say they need to make a change because I can't tell you what each guy does to the extent where I could say they need to get rid of this guy. He's a problem because of what they're doing on the court. Now, they have not done very well. The past 4 years have not been good basketball. They've not been successful basketball. Jeff Capel's job is to produce successful basketball, which means at the end of every season, looking at his roster, obviously, but looking at his coaching staff and saying, okay, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Who's doing a good job? Who's not doing a good job? Who needs to elevate his performance in order for our team to get better, in order for our team to elevate its performance? And he has to go through his whole staff. He needs to go through the assistant coaches. He needs to go through the strength and training staff, the administrative guys, the video guys, the ops guys, all those people behind the scenes, and determine who's doing a good enough job to help them win basketball games and who's not. And if he looks at the three assistants and says, I think Jason did a good job. I think Milan did a good job. I think Tim did a good job. I don't think our losing stemmed from those guys. Then you don't make a change. I think when people talk about needing Jeff Capel to make a change, there are a few things that go into it. One, for some, it's demanding a pound of flesh. And I suggested this on the message boards once to someone. I remember we were having an exchange. I forget even who it was. We were having an exchange about wanting to make changes. And I said, well, we don't know who's really responsible for this and for that. So you're kind of just wanting a pound of flesh. Someone has to go to make you happy. And I feel like they were like, well, no, I don't want a pound of flesh. Something's got to change here. To which I say, what you're saying is someone needs to be fired. You don't know who and you don't know why, but somebody's got to go. That's demanding a pound of flesh. And so when you ask me, do I think Jeff Capel should be making some changes to his staff by now? I'm not going to sit here and demand a pound of flesh. I'm not. I'm not going to sit here and say, I don't know who and I don't know why, but somebody needs to go. But I don't think that's everyone. That's not all Pitt fans saying somebody's got to go. So that's not all Pitt fans saying I demand a pound of flesh. I think what a lot of Pitt fans want, I think what they really want, aside from obviously winning basketball and good recruiting and all that, they want some indication from Jeff Capel that he's going to do something to improve the product. And he has said a bunch of times he's not happy with what's been out there, and they need to do better, and the program needs to improve, and everybody needs to do a better job. But they want to see something. They want to see. They want to see. They want to get the impression or get the appearance of Capel taking action, some kind of public action, with the aim of improving the program. And it's a weird thing to say. I understand where the sentiment comes from, but it's sort of a ghoulish thing to say. But Pitt fans want Jeff Capel to fire his brother. And Pitt fans want Jeff Capel to fire his brother as a way of publicly stating, as a way of Capel publicly stating, I'm dissatisfied with the product we put out there. I'm not content with this, and I'm going to change it and improve it and save it. And I'm going to go so far as to fire my own brother to get this thing on the right track. Now, I mean, there's rumors here and there. Oh, Jason's this or Jason's that. He's not good with this or he's not good with that. Like I said, it's hard for me. I can't sit here and tell you the impact Jason Capel has on Pitt's basketball program, positive or negative, with on the court, with coaching guys on the court. I can tell you he has been seemingly the main point guy for Pitt's efforts in recruiting Cleveland, which obviously has worked well. Marlon Barnes already committed, John Hughley in place, working on some transfers who have Cleveland connections, and I think Jason Capel's work is showing up there. But if Capel were to do that, I think there's a segment of the Pitt fan base that would say, look, he made the tough decision, the toughest possible decision, in order to get this program back on track. Even if he doesn't actually believe that's what the program needs. And for me, like I said, I think it's tough with basketball because I don't know what each of those guys does. I don't know what each of their roles is. And so to me, when I look at any coach, when I look at basketball, when I look at football, and football you can judge a little bit more because, again, coordinators have each side of the ball, position coaches have their spots. But to me, I look at it and I say, all right, this coach was hired. I want this coach to run the program however he thinks he needs to run it and see if it's successful. And if it's not successful, if he doesn't make the changes that he potentially could have made or he needed to make, then the axe falls on him. Then he's the one that goes down. But you have to leave the coach to run his program. And I mean, we sometimes get into conversations of, the athletic director should force the coach to fire this guy or force the coach to fire that guy. You guys know this if you listened to this podcast before, you've watched the video streams, you've read on Panther-Lair.com or on Twitter, any place I get an opportunity to say it, I've said it over and over. I don't think that's good business for an athletic director unless there's some sort of, and I asked Heather like this, should a director of athletics tell a coach to fire a staff member? And she said no, unless there's some sort of ethical violation or some... You can't tell a coach to fire a staff member just because you, as the athletic director, think that staff member is doing a bad job coaching. If they're robbing banks or somehow reflecting poorly on the university with their character or their conduct, yes, just like you would with any university employee. But when it comes to coaching staffs and hierarchies, just because you think the running back suck doesn't mean you can tell Pat Narduzzi to fire Andre Powell. That's an example, But it's got to be, the head coach has to be able to run his program with the understanding that if the program's unsuccessful, he's the one who will take the fall. So if he needs to make changes, he needs to make those changes. If changes are going to improve the program, he needs to make those changes. And so I don't know if Heather told Jeff Capel he needs to fire this guy or that guy. I hope she didn't. I don't think she should. I think she should have conversations with him. I think she should have conversations with the entire staff individually and say, how do you feel about the job you've done? How do you feel about the job the program is? The state of the program and all these different things. And then give Jeff Capel the freedom to make the moves he feels he needs to make. which I think is the case right now. I think Jeff Capel has the final say on those kind of personnel moves with his coaching staff, and I think that's the way it should be. So, going back to Michael B's question, and I think it was a good question. It was a good way to start off before we get into the newsy stuff. He says, I was just curious, do you think that Jeff Capel should be making some changes to his staff by now? I think Capel should make changes to his staff if that's what he feels he needs to do in order to win more basketball games. That's my answer. That's my answer. And I don't think it's about loyalty. I think it's about keeping the coaches who you feel can help you win games. And if you feel that these three guys, Capel, Brown, and O'Toole, can help you win basketball games, then you keep them on staff. And if it doesn't work, you all get fired. And that's what's at stake. And they know that. Everyone knows that. All right. Let's see here. I do want to get... let's get to a little bit of the news here and talk about some things. Let's keep on the basketball track. Jeff Capel got another transfer. This came over the weekend. Blake Hinson. He's a wing forward from Iowa State, really from Ole Miss, because he was at Iowa State kind of for 2 years but never played. His story, kid out of Florida, went to Ole Miss for 2 years, played pretty decent in the SEC, started about 58 games over the course of 2 seasons as a freshman and a sophomore, averaged 10 points per game his sophomore year, and then he transferred to Iowa State. Didn't play his first year due to an undisclosed medical condition. And then in last October, prior to the start of last season, quit the team. So he hasn't played basketball in 2 years. It's a bit of a red flag. I'll say that right off the bat. I think it's a bit of a red flag. But when he did play, he showed enough promise that I think the Pitt coaching staff was intrigued. When he did play, I think the Pitt coaching staff was able to look at his time as a player and see things that they feel can help them this season. And so they landed him. He visited over the weekend. He was going to visit, I think, LSU and Texas A&M, but the Pitt visit was good enough, impressed him enough that he decided to call that off and just go with the Panthers. So Blake Hinson will come in. He's an intriguing guy. Shot about, I think, high 30% from the floor, maybe like 39% from the floor, 33% from three, pretty decent inside the arc. Not a bad shooter from the outside. I think Pitt is expecting him to provide some shooting outside. I don't think you want him to be your main 3-point threat, but I think he can provide some of that, again, from the outside. He'll mostly play the 3, but he can also play the 4, and potentially in smaller lineups. I'm not sure if this, landing Blake Hinson, I'm not sure if that answers the need they have at power forward. I very much think they still have that need and need to fill that spot through the transfer portal this offseason. But Hinson has the versatility to play either spot. So he could go out there and start at the 3 with a big power forward who comes in along with 2 guards and John Hughley, or he could play at the 4 with a 3-guard lineup with Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton and Nike Sabandi and Hughley. You could go with, he can play either one of those kinds of lineups. He's a tough guy, plays pretty good on defense, and I think overall I think they like his versatility and how he can do some different things and play some different roles. And so, they've got 7 players for next season. Jamarius Burton and Nike Sabandi, Nate Santos, Will Jefferson, John Hughley returning, and then Nelly Cummings coming in as a transfer to play point, and Blake Hinson coming in as a transfer to play really on the wing, a 3 or 4 type of spot. So you're starting to see the pieces come together to form a roster for this team for the coming season. And I know we want to talk about the foundation for next year. We want to talk about building the program to sustain for the next couple seasons. But the reality is, and the focus is on this coming season. They need to get better for this year. They need guys who can come in and help them right now. They need guys who can come in and help them play in the fall of 2022 and the spring of 2023, because that's the crucial year for Jeff Capel right now. You do need to build for the future. You do need to bring in guys who can be a foundation for you. But the priority is winning right now. And so, I mean, we'll talk about the foundation and future and all that stuff in a second. But when you look at right now, with what they've added so far, I think you've got your point guard in Nelly Cummings. You've got two guards in Jamarius Burton and Nike Sabandi who can play 2 or 3. So if you want to go with a 2-guard lineup with like Cummings and Burton, Cummings and Sabandi, or you want to go with a 3-guard lineup with all 3, you've got that option. Burton could handle the ball as well if you wanted him to do that. I'm not sure that's his best role, but that option exists. But you've got your 3 guards, plus Nate Santos, who can come off the bench and be probably your best 3-point threat. Now, I mean, maybe they'll find someone else out of the transfer portal, but Nate Santos might be this team's best 3-point shooter, so you're going to need him to take a big step forward this offseason and really kind of evolve and develop as a player and someone you can trust on the court for 20 minutes a game, 15 minutes a game, and to hit threes and be a legitimate threat from outside. And then you got Hinson, who can play sort of the 3 or the 4. You got Will Jeffers, who can play the 3 or the 4. And then you have John Hughley. So you still have that big hole at the power forward spot. And you've got to find a way to fill that. I think you'd like to get another point guard, like someone who could be a backup point guard behind Cummings, so you don't have to rely on Burton or Sabandi in that role. And then, I think you'd like a backup center. So there are a bunch of options of where you could go there. And a bunch of them, this is the thing, it's starting to heat up a little bit for Jeff Capel with Pitt basketball recruiting because they had visitors over the weekend. They have visitors early in the week, and they're going to have visitors later in the week. So Blake Hinson was one of the visitors over the weekend. They got him. Fede Federico from he's from Finland, I think. He played at First Love, and he's at a junior college, Northern Oklahoma. He visited over the weekend. Liked that visit a lot. He could potentially come in and be your backup center behind John Hughley if they could land him, and not only be a backup center, but potentially play next to Hughley, play the 5 and have Hughley slide out and get some minutes at the 4. I think that's a possibility that you could see with this roster. But then, and then you could have Henson at the 3. You have some serious size at your 3, 4, and 5 spots with Henson, Hughley, and Federico. Decent numbers at the JUCO level, close to 2 blocks per game, which I think you like seeing out of someone with his size and length. So that would be one possible option to fill that backup center spot. On Monday, there were a couple of visitors. Michi Johnson, a guard from Ohio State, and Adu Thero from locally, drawing a blank on the school, doesn't matter, who's a guard. Who, both of those guys could potentially, could come in and help you with your backcourt rotation. I think Johnson in particular could come in and maybe play some point, maybe play off the ball. I think he was mostly off the ball at Ohio State. Probably a bit of a volume scorer in that regard. A guy who's going to have to take a lot of shots and probably will take a lot of shots, but maybe you can get him settled into a point guard role so you don't need Nelly Cummings to play 40 minutes a game or 38 minutes per game. At point guard, you could have Michi Johnson if you can land him, get him to come in and take some minutes at the point. And then Thero as well, I think, is a guy who could be a point, could be a 2, but he's coming in as a freshman. You see what you can do, if you can land him. You see what he's capable of and what he's ready to do if you can land him and bring him in. And then later in the week, 2 twins from IMG Academy, Jorge Diaz-Graham and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, a couple of freshmen who have some decent opportunities to go in college, guys who you could potentially bring in, and I think would help fill out some spots on the roster. And then Akuka Cook from UConn, who's a transfer who looked at Pitt took serious interest in Pitt as coming out of the recruiting process, coming to visit this weekend for an official visit. And he's a big one because he potentially could be the power forward here. He, averaged 2 blocks per game at UConn. Might be a better shot blocker than Mo Gee, who just averaged 2 blocks per game at Pitt this past season. And I bring that up because I predicted it. That was my bold prediction that he would average 2 blocks per game. I'm gonna come back to that as often as I can. But Akuka Cook could come in and potentially be your starting power forward. I think if they could land him, it would be, his career at UConn was not what it was expected to be when he was coming out, as a recruit. But I think he definitely would be a boost to this roster and give you a legitimate starting power forward. And if you could land him, before we even get into all those other guys I just mentioned, if you could land him, then you've got, you can start Cummings, Burton, Hinson, Cook, Hughley, and you've got a pretty decent starting five. I don't know if you're going to win the ACC with that, but I think you could have a pretty decent starting five. I really do. And then you start talking about Nike Samani and Nate Santos coming off the bench. Michi Johnson potentially being your backup point guard. Fede Federico presenting some, depth in the post. It's not there yet, but you can see this roster starting to come together a little bit. It's not there, and who knows? There are lottery tickets involved there. There are very much lottery tickets. Blake Hinson hasn't played in 2 years. Fede Federico is coming from a junior college. These are lottery ticket guys, if they could land him. But I don't think it's the worst thing to take lottery tickets when you're trying to rebuild the way Jeff Capel is. I don't think that's the worst option. And that's what they've done so far. I think it's what they're going to continue attempting to do. They'd like to get proven guys like a Nelly Cummings, who I think has had a really successful career. But they're also going to have to hit on a few lottery tickets like they did with Mo Gee. And I mean, to some extent, like they did with Jamarius Burton, I would say. Was a hit on a bit of a lottery ticket, a guy who transferred twice and wasn't terribly productive at his previous stops. So, it's starting to come together. I think the pieces are starting to kind of fall in, which we knew would happen. We knew they weren't going to get to August or September, October with only 5 guys on the roster. We knew that these pieces would come together. It was just a matter of waiting for it to happen and seeing how they come together, seeing what the pieces look like. Now, last year, the pieces looked like Jamarius Burton and Mo Gee and Nate Santos and Chris Payton. Mixed bag. You're going to have a mixed bag this year as well. You just need those top couple of guys to be good enough to fill out a rotation that can go 7 or 8 deep. Right now, they're at 7 guys on the roster. I don't know. I think they'd like to add enough guys that this 7 is not their top 7. That maybe 5 of these guys are their top 7. And the other guys are 8 and 9. I think so. I think they'd like to add at least two more quality guys to build up this roster and make it ready for the season. But like I say, it's getting there. It's getting there. Piece by piece. What do they say? What's Jeff Capel's line? Brick by brick. It's getting there. And we'll see where it goes. All right. Some comments and questions. RJC Man 38 says, Super Chatter says, you're always late. I am, but I was reading about Jay Wright. What do you want me to do? Brock Madonic says, after Jasir Whittington's visit, did you get any sense that he would commit 4 days later? And just how big is this commitment for Pitt? I saw he picked up an offer from Michigan today. So talking about Jasir Whittington, 4-star defensive tackle in the recruiting class of 2024, a guy out of Philadelphia, which has been an area that Pitt has been working on for a long time. He committed, what day did he commit? 2 days ago, Monday. He committed on Monday and, picked Pitt over a pretty impressive offer list. I mean, just running down the Power 5 schools here, you got Boston College, Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, Nebraska, Penn State, Syracuse, Temple, Tennessee, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia. As Brock mentioned, he tweeted out an offer, tweeted out today that, on Wednesday that he got an offer from Michigan. That's going to happen. More schools are going to keep offering. I mean, Zion Fowler, who committed to Pitt last October, keeps getting new offers. Schools are going to keep offering. They're not going to stop, and kids will keep tweeting out the offers. That's not going to stop either. You're not going to be able to get kids off of social media, no matter how hard you try. So these things are going to keep happening. It's just sort of inevitable. They're going to have to work to hold on to them for a couple years. It's a commitment from a guy who's still in his sophomore year of high school. When those happen, you say, well, we'll see. Pitt's not the only school in the country that has commitments in that class. We'll see. We'll see how long they hold on. I don't know, but it's a huge commitment for now. Even if you say, well, who knows how long he's going to stay committed. He's the number 7 defensive tackle prospect in the class of 2024 right now. He's the number 6 prospect in the state for the class of 2024 right now. He's the number 146 overall prospect in the nation in the class of 2024 right now, and he's committed to Pitt. There's nothing bad about that. Even if they end up not holding on to him, there's nothing bad about that. Pitt right now has the number 8 recruiting class in the class of 2024 with their one commitment. It's a reflection of the momentum they've got right now as a football program. And I've talked about this. I'm gonna keep repeating this because I always repeat this. I've said it for years, and it's the truth. I've probably said it for 15 years. That and I said it a lot last fall. I said it a lot in December when signing day came and Pitt was the ACC champs and they only signed like 12 guys and had a recruiting class that ranked in like the 60s nationally. And even people who follow recruiting, people who cover recruiting were asking me, why do the ACC champs only have like the number 65 recruiting class in the country? And I was shocked to get that question from like people who should know better. And I said, well, for one thing, they only have 12 recruits committed, so that's going to lower their ranking. But mostly is because those big seasons don't usually have an immediate impact on that current class. While Pitt was winning the ACC, they were working to build the class of 2022. That's not usually the class that would have the biggest impact. Where those big seasons usually have an impact is on that next year's recruiting class. So when Pitt... I have the same examples. I use the same examples all the time. When Pitt went 10-3 in 2009, it wasn't that 2010 class, the one that signed like 2 months later, that really had the impact. It was the 2011 class. That following summer after the 2009 season was a great one for Pitt. They got 4-star commitments all over the place. They were getting big-time recruits. They were getting guys with big-time offers. Never mind what their careers ended up being. But when you look at guys like Jamil Poteet and Terrell Chestnut and Bill Belton and Keyshawn Jarrett and Ben Klein and Quentin Alston? Is that his name? The linebacker from... I feel like it was Quentin Alston. Linebacker from New Jersey. He ended up going to Iowa. Lafayette Pitts and all these guys... they had on board as commitments that summer. Now, ultimately, they all bailed when there was a defensive tackle from New Jersey, a big 4-star kid. They all bailed when Dave Wanstead got fired. And then ultimately when Mike Haywood got fired, they really left. But that summer, man, Pitt was hot. And it was all because of the season before. It was carryover from that. It created momentum on the recruiting trail. 2018, they win the Coastal Division. They only go 7-7. They don't win the ACC. They only win the Coastal. But that following spring, it wasn't the 2019 class that got a boost, but that class of 2020. If you go back and look at the visitor list for the spring of 2019, the kids they brought in from the classes of 2020 and 2021, it's an unbelievable list. Jordan Addison's on that list. Jalen Barton's on that list. I feel like Rodney Hammond might have come in. I think Malik Newton came in. And you go down the list, the Tony Grimes, the 5-star cornerback who went to North Carolina, they got a ton of big-time recruits to come visit on the strength of winning the Coastal Division. They had success, and they parlayed it into recruiting momentum. That's what happened now. I put up an article last weekend running down the 50 recruits, 50 recruits with offers that we were able to confirm visited Pitt during spring camp. That was just the guys with offers. Probably double that with guys who didn't have offers. But you're talking about 50 recruits who had offers, who visited, with like a dozen or so of them being like 4-star prospects. That's a big time visitor list for the spring. And it's Pitt parlaying the success of the 2021 season, 11-3, ACC championship, top 15 ranking, parlaying that into recruiting momentum, which is what happened this spring. And you see it come through with Jasir Whittington committing as a 4-star prospect in the class of 2024. And you started seeing on Wednesday guys tweeting out their official visit confirmations for when they're coming in June, and it's going to be a busy, loaded June again, just like it's always been. But you can start seeing it coming together of the guys that they're going to bring in. It's going to be a big time. It's going to be a big month. It's going to be a really big month. And it's because of that season that they just had. They created the momentum. And it's paying off. It's paying off. And you're seeing it with the comments that recruits make. The number of unofficial visits. Because all these visits in the spring were unofficial visits. And if you forget the distinction, basically an official visit, schools can pay for the recruit to travel. They can pay for their boarding, their hotels. They can pay for their food. They can really roll out the red carpet. And everything's taken care of. You get 48 hours on campus, and the schools pay for everything. Unofficial visits, the recruit has to pay his own way. He has to pay for his own hotel. He has to buy his own food. The schools really can't pay for anything. And so usually what happens is your unofficial visits are the guys that are in driving distance. You know what I mean? You get guys to come in from Columbus. You get guys to come in from Detroit. You get guys to come in from Buffalo. You get guys to come in from Baltimore and D.C. now. You know, you get guys to come in from Philadelphia, PA. That's what you tend to get for unofficial visits. But when you're hot, when you've got recruiting momentum, when you've got a lot of kids interested in you because you just had your best, most successful season in 40 years, and because you are now, you've got a Heisman Trophy finalist, and you've got a Biletnikoff Award winner, and you're in the ACC championship game, and you're in the Peach Bowl, and you're getting all this momentum and attention, guess what? Now you got all these kids coming up from Florida for unofficial visits. You got kids coming up from Alabama for unofficial visits. You got kids coming up from Georgia for unofficial visits. Guys want to be here. Pitt is an attractive destination for football players right now because of the success they've had, because of the prominence and attention and relevance that they got out of that season last year. And if they keep it up this year, if they have another really good year this year, even if it's not quite as good as last year, if they win the Coastal again, even if they don't win the ACC, even if they don't end up in the top 15 or something like that, but they show that they're able to sustain some success, then it'll happen again. You know what I mean? And it'll happen even more. And it'll get even bigger. It's an exciting spot to be for Pat Narduzzi and his football program because they have been able to parlay this success into, again, momentum. And that's how you're supposed to play it. You win, and then you start attracting the recruits. And that's what Pitt has done this offseason, and this spring has been as good as any spring we've seen in a long time. I mean, it rivals the spring in 2019, which the visitor list was really good that year. But beyond that, you have to go back pretty far. And I think, we've seen Pitt do really well with June official visits. And that's been the case since they started being allowed to have June official visits. I feel like it might have been June of 2018 or 19 was the first one. I want to say it was like 2019. But I might be wrong. It might be 2018. I forget. I'll have to think about that. But since you started being allowed to bring in recruits for official visits in June, Pitt has just been killing it on those visits and making a killing. And Pitt always recruited well in June. They always got a lot of commitments in June. Now that you can have official visits, they've gotten close to filling their class like every year, just in June. And I don't see any reason to think that won't be the case again this year. I think they'll bring some of their top targets to campus. I think they'll get some of these guys in here for official visits, and they'll close the deal. And some of them will leave without committing, and they'll go visit a few other schools, and then they'll commit to Pitt. Some of them will leave without committing, even though they wanted to commit, but there isn't spots for them to fill. Their spots are taken, which has happened each of the past few years. And they'll leave without committing, but they'll wish they could have. So it's going to be another really good June for Pitt. It was a really good spring for Pitt. And Jasir Whittington, as a 2024 4-star prospect, that's a pretty good way to pretty good way to get it started. All right, let's look here. Scroll down. Brock Madonic says, out of all the recruits that announced today that they'll be visiting Pitt in June, what one player or players intrigue you the most that Pitt could get to commit? There were a bunch of them. I mean, we tried to keep track of them on the message boards. Actually, let me see. We've got if you go to Panther-Lair.com, you go to the football drop-down menu, we have recruit visit dates. And we've been adding all the official visits in there. And I'll tell you a guy to keep an eye on, a guy that I really like, I think the Pitt staff really likes. Isaiah Neal is a 3-star defensive tackle out of Baltimore. He visited Pitt this spring. He was here, when was he here? March 19th, so third week of spring camp, somewhere around there, second week of spring camp. He announced he's got an official visit to Pitt the first weekend of June. He's going to go to NC State after that. I'm not sure what else he has. I think those are the only 2 official visits he has scheduled right now. But we've got him listed as a 6'3", 270-pound defensive tackle. He's more... I mean, he's along the lines of what Pitt looks for in a defensive tackle. I mean, they want their defensive tackles to be active. They want their defensive tackles to be playmakers. They don't want just that big take up space, block-eating defensive tackle who just kind of, like I say, takes up space and lets the defensive ends and the linebackers run around and make all the plays. You're still going to end up with the defensive ends and the linebackers running around and making a lot of plays, but Pitt really wants its defensive tackles to be playmakers as well. That's why they loved Jalen Twyman. It's why they love Kalijah Cansey. It's what they thought Keyshawn Camp could have been. It's what he should have been if he had been able to stay healthy. 36 games over like 6 seasons. That's what he played. It's not. Yeah, I mean that's who he was, but that's what they wanted him to be. He was that kind of playmaking defensive tackle. Is what they hoped Amir Watts would be. It didn't quite work out, but they've gotten into a pattern. They've gotten into it. They've settled in with these kinds of defensive tackles who are playmakers. They're not just taking up space. Aaron Donald is the gold standard for that, but those are the kind of guys that Pitt wants along the defensive line. I think they believe Elliott Donald could be another one like that. I think they think DeAndre Jules can make plays. Bam Brima is a guy who was really a really skinny defensive end. He has now got the potential to play inside or outside. And so that's another one who could be a playmaker inside. I mean, Dorian Ford really kind of breaks that mold a little bit. He's just a big guy. I could ultimately see him moving to offensive guard or something like that. But that's the kind of defensive tackle they like. And I think Isaiah Neal from Baltimore is in that mold. So he's one guy I would look at. I don't know if he would commit on his visit. I think they would certainly try to get him to commit on that visit and skip the NC State visit. But he's one that I think they would really like to get and have a pretty good chance at getting. So I would keep an eye out on him. Let's see here. Got... I'm scrolling through some of the comments. Some people say I shouldn't talk as much basketball. So can we stop talking about Pitt basketball? This is more depressing than Schindler's List. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. That's just... we got to talk about Pitt hoops. I mean, Pitt hoops is part of it as well. And plus, here's the thing. I know that Pitt hoops wasn't great this year. It hasn't been great, and I know it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence or excitement. But there was news this week. There was news. There was positive news. With Pitt basketball, as far as getting Blake Hinson and the roster kind of coming together. And I think as they continue to build the roster, it's worth talking about, to talk about what this team is going to be and how it's going to come together and what they're going to look like. Because whether you like it or not, they're going to play basketball games again. And so we might as well talk about what that roster is potentially going to be once they start doing so. But Reed Worth has a question, says, does Pitt have a chance with Anthony Speck or Tamir Robinson? I feel like Pitt hasn't landed a highly touted linebacker recruit in a while. Would be awesome to land one of those guys. So Anthony Speck is a while off. He's a class of 2024 at Central Catholic, linebacker, middle linebacker. At Central Catholic. He's a sophomore now, coming to the end of his sophomore year of high school. Grew up a Pitt fan. He jokes about how he's got like a Larry Fitzgerald fathead in his room, and he's got Pitt stuff all over the place. A lot of people feel like Notre Dame it might be the move for him. I think Pitt's got a realistic chance. I think, look, the key for Pitt with all the locals, they have to keep winning. They have to keep winning, because if you fall off, it makes it easy for those other schools to pull them away. If guys are torn on whether or not they want to stay close to home, and you're not winning a lot, you're going 6-5 like they did in 2020, you're going 8-5 like they did in 2019, it gets a lot tougher to keep those locals at home. I think a lot of times with locals, Pitt is fighting an uphill battle no matter what. You need to take some of that away by winning a lot. And I think somebody like Anthony Speck or Quentin Martin in that 2024 class out of Bell Vernon, maybe one of the best, maybe the number one athlete in the state. You want to get those guys, you need to keep up with the success. Tamir Robinson is in the 2023 class, so he's finishing his junior year of high school at Brashear. He's interesting. I mean, he's an outside linebacker. I think he's ultimately going to grow into a defensive end. He might be able to stick at outside linebacker. There just aren't guys his size who move like he does. He's a freak. And he's going to be really, really good. He already is really, really good. To Reed's point about not landing any highly rated linebackers in a while, I mean, I think you're right. They haven't had much in the way of 4-star linebacker prospects. I think Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara both had pretty good offer sheets. When they were coming out of high school, I don't think they were 4 stars. I think they were both 3. But I think they had offer sheets that looked like 4-star offer sheets, if you know what I mean. And I definitely think those guys have become... I think they're on the verge of the kinds of seasons where we'll look back and say, boy, they should have been rated higher than they were. So those guys, I think, have the potential. But I understand what you're saying. That hasn't been a position that, Nick M points out Kamara and DeShields. Let me look at what they're rated. I mean, I think they were both 3 stars, but they had good offer sheets. What were they? The class of 2020, I believe it was. Let's bring up their... Yeah, Kamara was a 3-star prospect. He had offers from Power 5. He had Indiana, Iowa State, Kentucky, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, Syracuse. That was his Power 5 list. The concern with Kamara coming out of high school, I've talked about this before, is that he was... and I think for college coaches and like recruiting evaluators, they weren't really sure if he was fast enough to play safety or big enough to play linebacker. Now, I can tell you from standing next to him, he's definitely big enough to play linebacker now. And I think I don't know if he's fast enough to play safety, but he's got good speed for a linebacker. DeShields offers Power 5 offers from Auburn, Iowa State, Kentucky, Michigan State, Missouri, Oregon, Rutgers, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia. He had a really good he had a really good offer sheet. He had great film. I think there was a little bit of position uncertainty about Solomon DeShields if he would play wide receiver or linebacker, but I think he's going to be really, really good when it comes down to it at Pitt playing at linebacker. I'm excited to see what he does this season. Right Sox says, just looked at Quentin Martin, number 13 in the nation. Are we going after him? Yeah, I mean, Quentin Martin, do we have him number 13 in the nation in the class of 2024 on Rivals? No, we have him 12, actually, on Rivals. He's the number 12 prospect in the country. He's the number 1 athlete prospect in that class, the number 1 prospect in the state. For the class of 2024, he's a 4-star prospect at number 12 nationally. So you're right on the cusp of being a 5-star recruit. And yeah, Pitt is absolutely going after him. He is a top priority. They have done everything they can with him so far within the rules as far as contact. When he came to Pitt for the Clemson game, LaShawn McCoy was on the sidelines trying to recruit him, and I've heard from some people that said that McCoy was doing quite a good job trying to get Martin on board. He was recruiting him pretty well, and it seems like I think he was doing a good job. But look, I mean, Quentin Martin, everybody in the country wants Quentin Martin. Everybody in the country is going to be trying to get Quentin Martin, and Pitt is going to have to work really hard to keep him home. We'll see if they're able to pull it off. It's going to be a real challenge, but I mean, he can be a stud. He is a stud, and he's going to be great the next 2 years at Bell Vernon. I think he's going to be great when he gets to college. Pitt's going to want to be a part of that for sure. There's no question about it. Let's see if anybody else. Anything else? No, it looks like we got just about all of our comments out here. Listen, make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com throughout the week. We're going to have coverage of all the basketball visits. We're going to have coverage of all the football recruiting visits as they come together, as more visits get scheduled, and as more guys, take visits right now, because guys are taking visits, midweek visits, unofficial visits. It's going to be an active spring all the way through June for Pitt football and recruiting. And so I'm looking forward to it. I think you are too. So make sure you stay tuned. Panther-Lair.com. It's right there. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And then, don't forget the Panthers Insider Show, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. It's another hour of all Pitt sports talk. We talk about a lot of the stuff we've already talked about. We'll talk about anything that comes up between now and Saturday morning. So we got a lot of ground to cover on the Panthers Insider Show. Check that out, 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. And then, of course, we do this every Saturday. We do this every Wednesday night at 8:30. The Panther-Lair Show is a lot of fun. If you don't get a chance to join the live stream, or if you've never done it before, you should. It's always enjoyable. We like doing it, like all the conversation, the comments, questions, the back and forth. We have a good time with it, and you should definitely join. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you'll get notifications when we go live. You'll never miss a live stream here on Panther-Lair, the Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. So check that out. We would very much appreciate it. It's lots of fun. We enjoy it. I hope you do too. All right. Thanks to everybody who came in the live stream tonight. Thanks to everybody who watched the video or listened to the podcast later in the week. Appreciate all of you. And have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend. It's going to be beautiful. And we will talk to you next Wednesday night right here on the Panther-Lair Show on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.